I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with Marc Evans, the director of the limited series The Pembrokeshire Murders, and it's based on the real investigation that finally closed a couple of previously unsolved murder cases in Wales. Were you familiar with that case before you got the opportunity to direct this series?
I was not, and actually, I think what I was more familiar with was the place. Actually, a place that Pembrokeshire in West Wales, a place that I have family there. Every summer holiday as a kid was spent there. It's a beautiful part of the world, and then to hear about this case that almost, was a stain on that landscape, was kind of this unsolved thing that it kind of had haunted the area for so long. Was I was immediately interested, and the further I got into the case, the more it seemed like such an extraordinary and strange story.
It must have been surreal then, knowing this area and this landscape, but then having it tied in this way to this really disturbing crime. How was that to wrap your head around?
Well, in a way, that was the fascination, because in a way, these places in our heads are sort of idyllic, and loads of people walk the coastal path. It's such a beautiful place, and these ancient cliffs, and yet there was this horrible serial killer lurking. And the way that they, there was this sort of feeling that people might have known who he was. That happens in rural areas, but the way that they had to try and forensically get to him and stop him. He was in prison and he was about to come out, and they sort of knew it was him. And there was a lot of local rumor around the fact it might have been him, but they had to approach it in a very forensic and clinical way, and try and get this guy before he came out and did any more damage.
And that's another one of the interesting things about this story. In a lot of detective stories, it's about who done it, and in this case, the prime suspect is known from the very beginning, and it's more about sort of tying them to the crimes and proving that John Cooper did it. How does that affect your approach to kind of building the tension of the story as a director?
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, it's a whodunit from the police point of view, and I suppose it's the Titanic problem, right? The Titanic's going to sink, kind of thing. So there is a sort of danger that the normal ace card you have is suspense in these things. The suspense in this is really the ticking clock of the fact that they knew and probably could make a fair assumption that this guy had done it, and he was in prison and he was coming out. And it really was a case that the real life detective, Steve Wilkes, is going, we have to put a case together, because when he comes out on remand from us, I mean, the fact was he was in prison for smaller crimes, right? They never got him for the murders. That we have to do this, and quick. And of course, that kind of forensic work, it ain't quick. It's slow and it's painstaking. So there's a tension in the how they did it of the story, that in a way, once you get over that hurdle of saying this is probably the guy, we were slightly aided by the fact, I have to say, that it wasn't a well-known murder. So had it been a really famous case, then the audience didn't necessarily know that they were going to succeed in convicting him, but they knew pretty early on that this probably was the guy.
And Steve Wilkes wrote a book about this case on which the series is based. Had you read that, or what?
No, I quickly read it when I knew it was, was it possibly directing it. I'm very friendly with the journalist he co-wrote it with, and there's an interesting little strand in this, which I think people would enjoy, is that the sort of, and quite often in these cases, the police and the media are sort of are different camps, right? The police are doing the job and the media are trying to intrude on that or find out about it. In this particular instance, there was a real collaboration between local media, this local journalist called Jonathan Hill, and this the policeman in charge, which is Steve Wilkes, as you say. And there's a sort of extra twist, because you couldn't write it. It's a sort of Rupert Pumpkin moment almost. There's this point where they discover that between the murders, John Cooper, the suspect, had appeared on national television on a dart throwing quiz, which is very popular over here at the time. So then the journalist gets involved in trying to find the archive, and this becomes instrumental in the way that they nail the guy in the end. So there's a really interesting strand here about, it's not quite entrapment, but it's this idea that they could use the news and the media to get John Cooper on side, and also to find archive that would ultimately help them nail the guy.
And Luke Evans is the actor who plays Steve Wilkes in the series. What was it like working with him to play this real character who is a very recent history too?
I think the decision is, to impersonate or not to impersonate. And Steve Wilkes was very funny. He thought that Luke Evans was really good for the part, but not quite good looking enough. And of course, Luke Evans is a superstar and very good looking. So it's not an impersonation, that's fair to say. But Luke is very Welsh. My connection with Luke, to be honest, was that we'd done a series of commercials for visiting Wales. So we'd been to all the beauty spots together and filmed similar countryside. And now there was a chance to work together on a drama. And I just think he's a great actor, and a very understated actor. And he sort of understood the responsibility that went with playing a real guy, because it's not so much about whether you impersonate Steve Wilkes or not, but it's more to do with an approach which is about authenticity, veracity, and respect, right? Because you have to, there's victims out there, and Luke was very, very thorough in making sure that, sort of everything that came out of his mouth was a version of the truth. These things happen, so there's a kind of responsibility attached to that, especially if it's your patch and he's a Welsh actor, and he knew that the people in Wales would be looking at this really hard and looking at this performance. So we had a great time actually doing it. We felt that we were doing something for where, it's a dark story, but we were sort of representing the country in a funny sort of way.
And then the opposite end of that coin is Keith Allen playing John Cooper. What was the approach to that character and developing who he was and his side of the story?
Keith's a very intelligent actor and made some really interesting choices. And the thing about John Cooper was there's a couple of things that, that was a bigger pressure in a way, because people who have seen John Cooper, people who are interested in the crime, can access him online, as you can access everything online now. So there was a kind of way he had of talking and a kind of physical appearance that Keith was fairly close to him physically anyway, but there was a sort of accent which is to do with South Pembrokeshire, with this very, very specific accent. Keith Allen had worked in Tenby, which is the main town down there, working on the fishing boats when he was a kid. He knew the accent, so he did a really good job of doing enough of the accent to make us feel that it was authentic, but also making it something that the greater public could understand, or people who weren't Welsh could understand. Equally, the most interesting bit actually was we had to do some technical wizardry to put Keith Allen as a younger character into the archive of the quiz show I was talking about, the Bullseye. And that was, technically that was a lot of fun. But I think the thing that Keith understood by studying John Cooper was that, like many of these guys, he's a man of many faces. And one of the faces was a sort of humble innocence that he could portray, which he does in the quiz show. So when he stands up at the end and does his own defense in the court, he told me that he was going to make it sound like a bad wedding speech. And that was part of the play acting. That was a very astute piece of decision making by him as an actor, because John Cooper was very good at making himself feel like they're just an ordinary guy and appear that way, even though he was obviously very evil and very, very messed up. So I thought Keith brought a lot to the table actually as an actor.
And recreating that trial, did you have a lot of material to draw from in terms of setting the stage for that, and of course, all the testimony and all the events that happened? Yeah,
that was, in a way, that was a kind of, embarrassment of riches, really. That's where you have to just kind of condense it down. But again, we really wanted to feel the rhythm of a court, and everything was accurate. And I think, especially for people, your side of the pond watching this, I think one thing I can say we achieved is total authenticity. So that's what a British court feels like. Those were the testaments, that pretty much verbatim, some of them. There's an extraordinary scene, I think, where they have a video link to John Cooper's son, and everything around that, which is very dramatic, happened. And then there's another scene which I think the actors really kind of do a great job, and that is when they had to, some of the victims who survived, the rape victims, had to give their testimony from behind a little curtain, and it's such a tense thing to be in a court and know that the perpetrator of the crimes is physically there, and the only thing that divides you from that guy is this little flimsy little curtain that the usher pulls across. and it's almost like a confessional, a Catholic confessional box. It's like, so there was lots to, while again wanting not to be in any way sensationalistic, there was a lot of natural drama in that scenario.
And shooting like the exteriors in Pembrokeshire, what was the collaboration like with cinematographer Baz Irvine on sort of capturing that location, and of course under these very different circumstances than as you said, you've worked with Luke Evans before on capturing the setting.
Well, Baz is a great. He's just my right hand guy. I love him. I've done such a lot of so many trips together trying to photograph things. The thing about Baz is he's Irish. And so he understands a little bit. I mean, but it's so close, really, the Irish coast that he loves so much and the Welsh coast that I love so much, that we tried really hard to capturing the light down there. It's a place where a lot of painters go to live because on the western coast of Wales, the western extremity, you've got the Irish Sea, and so we shot at times of the day where the juxtaposition of the beauty of that place was part of the sort of tragedy of the story and part of the drama. So we worked really hard to try and put nature, if you like. I know it sounds weird, but to have the place as a character. And I think we succeeded in doing that.
And working in detective dramas is something that you've worked on in the past. How is it different working on a real story versus a fictional one?
Well, the writer's Ed Whitmore's very articulate on this. He said, every event, every fact has a sort of added value because somehow that it's true. And I think if you can convey that through authenticity, there's a sort of, some of the work is done for you in terms of the dramatic power of the piece. So in a way, it's about being as truthful as you can, knowing that it's in the structure of a dramatic piece,
Are you drawn in particular to mysteries and detective stories in general, or is that just kind of how things have shaped up?
A bit of both. People call me Dark Mark sometimes because I end up with all these dark subjects. But I do find the mystery, the conundrum that surrounds these kind of stories interesting. How somebody, the mystery, if you like, around not so much the details of the crime, but the sort of psychopathy and the psychology behind these things, there's a sort of strange parallel between the organizing principle that police have to use and we have to use in telling a story. They're narratives that are unfolding naturally for them, and I do find that stuff fascinating. Yeah, I do.
And have you gotten reactions from like Steve Wilkes? Like what did he think of this portrayal and this take on the entire event?
I'm very pleased to say that he approved on it. I mean, he was part of the journey, to be honest. So was Jonathan Hill, the journalist. The characters met the people they were playing. Steve was there for the rehearsals because I wanted Luke to ask any questions that he could face to face, and for Steve to be completely happy that we were a safe pair of hands in terms of telling this story that was 6 years of his life, really. So that was a very genuine collaboration, and he was very happy with it. I'd like to think in a way he was part of it, to be honest. So he was pleasantly surprised by the drama of it, but knew all along the details of it, if you like. He was part of the story, really.
And what do you hope people who watch this story, especially people who weren't familiar with the case, what do you hope they take from this story?
I think on a thematic level, just the diligence of the police when they're good, because there's a lot of films out there about police being bad. Just the sort of thoroughness and the diligence and the heroism, quiet heroism of these guys and women. And on top of that, undeniably on a slightly sort of patriotic level, that I get to show the world Pembrokeshire and that corner of the world, which I think, I'm very proud of the authenticity and very proud of the veracity of the piece. So I can guarantee anybody who watches it will get both a feel for the place and for exactly how that particular crime was solved.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the series, and
thank you.
Thank you so much for talking with me about it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a great pleasure, and thanks for showing interest. Brilliant.